Well, Jim, one other big hot button issue this past week was apparently there was a podcast, I think it was a podcast, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson with AJ Styles talking about the departure from the WWE of Gallows and Anderson. Did you hear anything about this?
Yes, I did. Well, I heard that they told the evolution of how Triple H kept, offering more money and trying to get him to sign and saying he'll fix them up for the rest of their life and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've commented on AJ thinking that Paul Heyman was a liar, which is like somehow somebody's just discovered that water is wet. And I've said that if I was Anderson and Gallows and I got promised $750,000 a year for 5 years and that lasted for 3 months, that I'd be in prison trying to find the fucker that screwed me around on that deal. But especially now to hear the level of pursuit that they just had to sign him, and they kept offering more money and more time and more money and more time just to get him to not debut on the opening AEW Dynamite. I guess until they saw that show, they believed that it was going to be some competition or trouble for him. Apparently, they had never spoken to Tony Khan on the telephone. If they'd called me, I could have told him, don't bother worrying. But to turn around and then do that, because I've said this before, I'll say it again. They were just chasing him to get him to stay because they didn't want him to go to the opposition. Okay, that's fine. That's business. But once you've made a commitment, it's not those guys' fault they wanted to go elsewhere. They had a good deal and things they wanted to do. You talked them into staying, so now the burden's on you to keep your end of the fucking bargain, pandemic or no. When you've told guys you're going to set them up for life and promise them that amount of money over that amount of time and it don't last fucking 3 months, fuck you. I'm sorry, fuck you. And once again, if Anderson and Gallows got a lot more restraint than I would.
Well, let me ask you, and I want to ask you about specific things they said. I have some quotes here, but to go back to the Monday Night Wars, Razor and Diesel, Nash and Hall, they went to WCW. They were main eventers.
Right.
Vince obviously did everything he could to make sure Shawn Michaels didn't go to WCW, where his friends were.
Yeah, well, and he thought that I've told that story before, he thought that he had made sure Nash and Hall weren't going anywhere either, because we were out in, God, where was it? Des Moines, Iowa, somewhere out in the heartland at TV, and both Nash and Hall had told Vince to his face, they're staying. We're with you, Vince, because he came back telling me and Bruce and Jerry, they said, they're with us. He said, Hall said, I wouldn't be anything without you, boss. I would never leave. And then they faxed their resignations. That was Tuesday night, right? We get back to the Stamford on Wednesday. On Thursday, the resignations were on the fax machine. So, yeah. But they were top guys, and Vince freaked out about that because not only was he losing 2 top guys, but he wasn't prepared to lose them at that point because they told him they were staying.
And Vince didn't want other than Bret Hart, Vince didn't want any of his top guys going to WCW. No,
and the only reason he would tolerate it with Bret was because he wanted to get out from under the big contract he'd signed with Bret. If he'd been on a normal contract, he wouldn't have wanted him to go anywhere either.
And we even saw that with the Ultimate Warrior, who had a big problem with the company in 1996. Vince tried to bring him back after that because of him going to WCW.
Yes. And offered him all that money. I would have done the Bill Watts Grizzly Smith thing and said, here, I'll give you this money if you'll go to WCW and ruin their business from within.
So those are top guys. Not meant to be disrespectful to Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. I don't think they're anywhere near that level. Would Vince have reacted the same way if it was a Bob Holly or a JBL? Bradshaw at the time. Justin Hawk Bradshaw, I think still, actually.
No.
If they had said, we're going to go to WCW once our contract is up, would there have been a big play to sign a mid-card guy to keep them in the 1990s?
Well, they would have tried to re-sign the guys you just mentioned or anybody on that level. They would have probably even offered them a little bit more money than they were making or whatever, but there would not have been a bidding war or this full court press to sign In some cases, Vince would have probably said, well, good, he's been here for a while. Maybe he'll get over, learn a new hold down there or something. Vince used to make fun because Jim Ross would say, why can't a guy just go away for a while and come back after he's learned a new hold? Just something, make it different. How can I miss you if you won't go away?
Because Chris Jericho's kind of been doing his own thing for a while, so you can't really include him, but Moxley's the only guy that was actually a top guy, or at least near that level in WWE, who chose AEW. Everyone else was a mid-card guy in the WWE. Cody Rhodes.
That wanted to get turned loose and show what they could do. And unfortunately now are being turned loose. It's like, instead of being a fucking sheep in a pen that's just being bred for slaughter, you're a fucking sheep with no sheep herder in AEW. You just wandered around in the fields all loose on your own with no guidance.
So where do you think this comes from now, where, like a guy like Brody Lee, these guys that WWE really desperately tried to lock down before AEW? Again, not top guys.
That's the way you phrased it is the exact way to phrase it. Before AEW, I guarantee you that there would not be that level of bidding or putting, and I like Anderson and Gallows both. I know them. I've worked with them. I like them. I don't know a lot of people in the wrestling business today worth $750,000 a piece, much less those guys, the way they had been presented there. As we've always talked about, it's not how good you are, how talented you are. It's how you've been presented to the audience in the place that you're at. You can't go from zero to hero in fucking overnight. So no, I don't think they were worth $750,000 just because in these days, almost nobody is. At least in terms of ratings or fucking ticket sales before this, maybe merchandise, there's a few guys, but so you're right in that respect, but they didn't ask them. Gallows and Anderson didn't ask the WWE to continue to give them offers. They said, we're going to go over here and do this thing that we've promised to do with our friends and go work in Japan, and we'll be fine. Thank you. And they kept after them. So I'm sorry, but yeah.
Well, let's get some actual quotes here. Because again, the story goes that they were getting set to meet with Tony Khan, and the day before was when they decided to sign with WWE, which that just seems like bad timing. I don't know what they were thinking.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, they'd given their word that they were going to AEW, and that caused some bad feelings with their I guess their Buck buddies, their buddies of the Bucks. That's in another life. If they were an actual babyface team, they should have a fan club and let all the kids be the Buck buddies. But anyway, so they went back on their word. But if somebody in the wrestling business had ever told me, Jim, we're going to come work for you, but then they called me at the last minute and said, no, somebody just offered us $4.5 million over the next 5 years each to not do that, I'd say, goddamn, please take it. So that.
Well, again, to the topic of them blaming Paul Heyman, this is a quote from the show. This is from Carl Anderson. Brody Lee texted me and goes, quote, they fucked you guys. We fucked our friends, and we feel we fucked them over. We don't feel good about it because we know where we wanted to be. This is their choice not to go to AEW, to re-sign with WWE, and then WWE cutting them when the pandemic hit. Getting that call, referring to the call from Mark Carano in Talent Relations, it didn't feel good. It took me back to having these conversations with Triple H, and he looks at me and goes, dude, I look at you and I see your kids. I think about, what if AEW doesn't last? I can promise you one thing. WWE will always be here.
Well, he wasn't lying. They always will be there. It just Anderson and Gallows won't be a part of it.
We stopped being boss and employee at that point, and we were obviously not friends, but two human beings talking. I'm not saying that Triple H could have stopped anything or even cared, but hearing that from your boss and having it happen, it's like, damn, they don't give a fuck. Trying to get to the bottom of it because it did feel weird. Asking around, we heard, well, it was Paul Heyman inspired. Really? We told AJ that. He asked someone what they think of it. That person said yes. AJ went to Paul and said, "Did you fire these guys or put the word in?" Paul said, "No, you have my word that I didn't do this. If I would have known, I would have gone to bat for them." AJ went back to the same guy, asked again, and then went to Vince. AJ goes to Vince and said, "Tell me the truth. Is Paul the one who said fire these guys?" Vince told AJ, quote, "They weren't on my list, but yes, it was a Heyman thing." And then Gallows jumps in and says, "He said we were making too much money for what we were doing, and he's a fucking liar and a piece of shit." What do you think? And we've all talked about Paul Heyman's issues with honesty in the past, but the idea that they're blaming him for them being released instead of Vince. What do you think?
Nobody has a list of people to be released unless it comes from Vince McMahon or has been approved by Vince McMahon. Unless you are so anonymous and nondescript and low down on the totem pole that nobody even knows you're there, then in that case, then Vince might turn around, "Hey, where did so-and-so go? I haven't seen him in a while." But anybody who means anything, no. If the writers don't have anything for you, they'll tell Vince they don't have anything for you. And Vince will either say, "Well, find something because we're paying him," or, "Okay, well, let's let him go." If Paul had a list of anything, it was suggestions, because nobody gets to make a list of anything except suggestions around Vince McMahon. And so now I can believe that Paul heard Vince bury these guys for putting up a fight about re-signing or holding them up for more money or whatever, or, oh God, and somehow Paul got the idea that if he put in a few well-placed fucking verbal boots to him that it would get over with Vince. I can believe he did that. I can believe he conveniently at a convenient time to get a pop or a nod out of Vince, put the mouth on him, as Dennis would say. But he didn't make any decisions that Vince McMahon either didn't tell him to make or approve of to begin with. And nobody else does either. It just, so yeah, I mean, both of those things could be true, but it's not like Heyman could have saved him if Vince didn't want him to be saved, and it's not like Heyman could have fired him if Vince didn't want him fired. So there you go.
And they made a bad decision. They should have done AEW in New Japan.
Boy, especially now they'd only be working one time a week, maybe. And the good talent that they do have in AEW only gets TV once every 3 weeks or whatever. I guess they do YouTube, but we don't care because that's where they hide all their outlaw guys that they're embarrassed to show in public.
But that's taped on the same day as the other stuff.
Well, now that there's no fans, they're not hurting those fans' feelings. Before, when they were having to tape the dark matches involving their, outlaw guys and freak show contingent, they had to actually show that shit to the people that had paid for tickets. Now they can just slide it in there and they've got an audience that's going to cheer for whatever. Well, they had that before. Before they had an audience that paid to get in and would still cheer for whatever they saw, regardless whether it sucked or not. Now they have no audience except the people they let come in, but they don't have to fucking tell them what to do, and they do the same thing. But they don't pay. They don't pay to get in there. So, there's something to be said for that.